All right. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for When Markets Shift, Relationships Win, Making LinkedIn Work for Financial Advisors. I'm Sadie. I lead the go-to-market efforts here at Reconnect. And actually, if you're having any trouble, please shoot us a chat in the box on the right-hand side of your screen. If you want to submit questions, please feel free to do so as we go through the content today. We'll save them for the end and take any questions that might come up. But the first thing I want to do is number one, thank you for being here. Thanks for dedicating some time to learning a little bit more about best practices on LinkedIn. And the second thing I want to do is go ahead and launch a poll. It just helps me understand kind of who's attending and what you're experiencing with regards to LinkedIn right now. So there are a couple questions on the poll. It's really simple. Just how would you describe your current results? And what's your approach, right? What kind of strategy are you using on LinkedIn today? So I will give that about 30 seconds for people to go ahead and answer. Thank you guys for participating. I appreciate it. And we will go from there. It just helps me a little bit to have an idea of what people are experiencing that are on the phone. In the meantime, I'll just put out a reminder. We are recording today's event, so we will be sharing a copy of the recording, usually about 24 to 48 hours after the event. It takes us a little bit of time to process it, but it will be available afterwards. All right, and over 80% of you have participated in the poll, so I think we'll go ahead and close that one out. Thanks for participating. And actually, before I do that, the most common answer to the first question of how are your current results is I get occasional responses, but inconsistent, which is probably the number one thing that I talk to people about. And then actually we have about a third of people on the phone are saying they don't really use LinkedIn for outreach right now. So if that's your situation, thanks for joining us. You're in the right place to figure out whether that might be something that you should be using for outreach and how to make it work for you well. In terms of what describes your current LinkedIn approach, it's pretty well split actually, between I have a clear system or I'm mostly kind of reactive, and I'm not really very active at all yet. So those are all about a third of people answered all of those three, and that's pretty normal. By the way, I mostly react to things. Join the club, me too. But a clear system or process I follow, about a third of you have a clear system or process. That's awesome. Fantastic. Hopefully I have something to add to your system or process that will be helpful for you today. And frankly, if you want to share your system at the end during our question and answer session, I would love that as well, so that we can all improve. So let me close out that poll and we'll keep moving. As I mentioned, we're here to talk about best practices for financial advisors specifically, or any kind of related titles, right? And one of the things that I'm really privileged to do as here at WeConnect is talk to our customers all the time about what they're doing and what's working and what's not. And as you can imagine, that changes, right? There are a lot of things going on in the world right now. And what we see is that we actually have a lot of customers who maybe are super active on LinkedIn, but they're not getting the results that they want. And I've been in marketing for 20 some odd years. So to me, that's absolutely a marketing problem, of course, because that's a little bit of to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail issue, right? But I do see that a lot of wealth advisors or financial advisors, they're already active on LinkedIn. They're probably posting occasionally. They're connecting with people. They know that their network has value, right? And maybe they're even doing occasional outreach, but it's not consistent and it's not in a way that drives really organic results, right? It may be, and by the way, sometimes maybe it's really salesy. That doesn't feel good to any of us. I probably see only a handful that are really doing this well, and so wanted to have a conversation about what that looks like. But even like posting and connecting, doing some outreach occasionally, it doesn't necessarily become real conversations for them either. And so that's not fun. And by the way, if you're not achieving the results, you're just going to stop doing it, right? Because there's no point in wasting your time on something that isn't working. So we want to talk about what that system would look like. And again, some of this is really basic. I'm glad to see that we've got about a third of people on the phone who aren't using LinkedIn at all. So you can kind of lay a good foundation from the beginning. And for some of you more advanced users, please feel free to weigh in also. All right. we're in the middle of some weird market stuff going on, right? Let's all acknowledge that, there's a lot going on in the world right now. About a month ago, some things changed. A lot of people got more nervous about a whole lot of things with regards to business. Certainly, we're seeing it on our end, and we're seeing, trends and behaviors shift fairly significantly, frankly, maybe more significantly than we were expecting. What does that mean? Well, when people get really nervous about what's going on in the world or, macroeconomic things, political things, other things going on, they just slow down, right? Maybe they still know that they need like a new financial advisor or that they should move from, managing things themselves to having some professional advice, but they're going to be a little more cautious about that, right? Because they're going to be more aware that the world is a little bit scary. By the way, the world is always a little bit scary, right? And that those decisions really matter. And so they're going to take their time. So maybe that means your sales cycles extend. People need more reassurance, more hand holding, right? Before they make a decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that the decisions don't get made, but it means that people move more slowly. Um, the and then also that trust matters more, right? Um, the people that they know and trust are more likely to be the ones that they go to rather than stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying something brand new. So in uncertain markets, relationships perform better than tactics. That's kind of always true, by the way, because on some level, a lot of us feel uncertain a lot of the time. But particularly right now, expect people to be slowing down, expect that building those relationships are going to be really, really valuable, and expect that people are going to be a little bit more cautious. All right. So what do we see? What I see a lot of is that I talk to financial advisors all the time who are talking about, oh, I did a roundabout reach to, extended family, or I did a roundabout reach to previous colleagues, or I did a roundabout reach maybe to, real estate investors in my area, whatever that looks like, right? To a like one-off group of people that they had identified. So I see that a lot. Or maybe it's like, oh, I'm constantly kind of hunting and pecking. And we get this too, right? For our own sales team, they're just like kind of out there looking around for who might be a good prospect, but that may or may not be a productive way to approach it. Um, and again, if you're not in marketing, you don't think about in terms of campaigns. So maybe you're thinking about it just on one-off basis, not in terms of ongoing campaigns and how they're producing over time. Um, so really what we see is that consistency, having a relevant message, and timing. So that's the other thing, right? You can be reaching out to the perfect person, and until the timing is right for them, it's not going to matter. And so what we want to do is find those people who might have the pain points that you solve, right? Who might need better investment advice or might need better money management, whatever that looks like for you. The But until they have a trigger, until something is forcing them to try and solve that problem. Sorry, just getting a few questions coming in. Thanks for submitting them. Until they have a trigger that forces them to go solve that problem, they're not going to take action, right? And so it's both someone who has a pain point and someone who has a trigger that is forcing them to solve the problem now. Because I might be aware that I want better investment advice for a very long time, but not really motivated to prioritize that at the top of my to-do list in terms of all the other things that are going on. All right. So what does that look like? Consistency plus relevance plus timing. Step one is identifying the right people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Step two, running structured campaigns and running them consistently. By the way, the other thing that I see, and frankly, I see it even among people who get decent results from LinkedIn, is that they go, oh, it's spring. I guess I should run this type of campaign. And it's sort of one off, right? Oh, it's the holidays. I guess I should run this type of campaign. Instead of having a mapped out strategy that takes you through the whole year of what you're doing on a weekly, monthly, annual, quarterly basis, right? And so I would really encourage you to move towards setting up a structure and a framework that tells you exactly what you're supposed to be doing and when, and then makes it really, really easy to do that, right? And staying consistent over time. Again, structured campaigns, great. Reaching the right people, great. But do it all the time so you're staying top of mind. Back to the comment about trust matters more than usual right now. That's something they say, what, 17 times you have to hear something, hear a brand name or a saying or someone's name before you remember it and you recognize it. You want to be in front of your prospects as often as possible. It is absolutely relevant. It is absolutely critical that they know your name and they think of you as a trusted advisor, whether or not they ever work with you, right? Because the other thing that you want is people out there knowing your name and thinking you as a trusted advisor in case it comes up in another conversation and they can be a referral source for you. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about designing a system, is to move from kind of individual messages and one-offs to really more consistent flow throughout the year, structured campaigns, and we'll talk about what that looks like, and identifying the right people. All right. There are basically 5 campaigns that we see that ought to be kind of on every financial advisor's plate or LinkedIn plan for the moment. So you've got a set of campaigns that are kind of always on, where maybe it's just like connecting with new people. Maybe you went to an event or a local networking event, right? And you're kind of weekly reaching out, adding people to your network, nurturing people that are already in your network. There's some kind of ongoing activity, some of which you can automate, some of which you can't. That is, oh, let's go back. Sorry. I apologize. I hit the button on my mouse and it went a little crazy on me. All right. So there's a set of activities that are kind of always on that you're going to want to be running all the time. Then you're also going to be want to running things like reconnection campaigns. Maybe this is existing customers that you haven't spoken with in a while just because they haven't really need anything. Their stuff is, on autopilot and it's running fine. You can leverage LinkedIn to reconnect with them. Hopefully, you already have other ways to reconnect with those people, but also LinkedIn. And then reconnection with previous prospects, right? Maybe they haven't made a decision, but they're still someone you can nurture and be helpful, etc. Could be reconnection with previous colleagues, right? Depending on if you have a set of colleagues that might be a good source of leads for you. Then there's a set of campaigns that would be event driven. So this might be things like acknowledging when there's financial uncertainty in the market or when there are maybe regulatory changes or hey, it's tax season, right? There are a million different things that can change in the market. So you're going to want to run a set of campaigns around that because if we can give people relevant advice when they're looking for it or even before necessarily they're aware that they're looking for it, again, you're building that trust, you're building that instinct, that muscle memory where they come to you for advice naturally. And that's really important. So it's not so much, a lot of these campaigns aren't sales campaigns. They're not like, hey, come use me and you'll get a 10% discount or whatever that looks like. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about establishing a repeatable and known brand where people come to you for financial advice when they need it. All right. Then typically we recommend like a theme, a monthly theme. By the way, it's something that I personally love to do from a marketing perspective as well. Or maybe you have a rolling set of focus areas. And this could be monthly or it could be maybe quarterly. But there are different things throughout the year and they're often related to seasonality, right? That you're talking about just to be helpful, just to be top of mind, to remind your people, hey, here are some of the things you should be thinking about. Like it's the new year. What does that mean in terms of your finances? What should you be reviewing? What should you be aware of? Are you prepared from a tax perspective? Or, gee, we're coming up on tax season. Have you taken these steps to make sure you're as prepared as possible? Right. And obviously, tax is the obvious seasonality one, but there are others. If you're working with a corporate group, maybe there are different quarterly deadlines throughout the year that you can be talking about. Maybe they don't have a fiscal end of year, or a calendar end of year. They have a different fiscal year. Lots of different kind of theme areas you can talk about. And then the other one, and by the way, if I had to pick one campaign for you to do that would make the biggest difference in their business, referral and centers of influence campaigns. This is a huge one. I have personally implemented this for many, many, many clients, and I will tell you, sometimes the results and the percentage response you get from this is unbelievable. And a lot of that has to do with how you've laid a foundation for helping clients in the past, how much they've trusted you previously, et cetera. And so we'll talk just a little bit more about this. But most advisors, they do one of these types of things. Maybe occasionally they go, oh, yeah, there's some big new regulatory change. So let me send out like a themed newsletter, things like that, right? Or maybe they go, you know what? I haven't caught up with like previous clients for a while. Let me do a reconnection campaign once in a while. But they're not being consistent about all of it and letting it come together in a way that creates a system that drives leads all year round. So that's what I'd like to encourage you to do. All right, so what are centers of influence? Obviously, I think everybody knows what a referral is, and referrals can come from existing clients, they can come from previous colleagues, they can come from family members, they can come from a lot of places. Centers of influence, though, this is more where we're talking about people who already have relationships with the types of people that you want to serve. And so that could be things like other financial professionals who maybe don't overlap directly with you, right? It could be different types of attorneys depending on what type of audience you're serving, insurance agents, mortgage brokers, again, business and financial professionals who probably work with your ideal clients. And while we're on the subject of ideal clients, I want to pause on that one for a minute. If, well, if you're like the average financial advisor that I talk to, your answer to ideal client is someone who has more than XYZ amount of dollars to invest, right? I want someone who has more than, $100,000 to invest, or more than $500,000 to invest, or whatever that looks like for you, or someone who's approaching retirement. A lot of times it has to do with the financial involvement and maybe stage of life. I would encourage you to do some pretty deep processing of what your ideal client looks like. Because for me, I talk about two different things. In the software world, we use the acronym ICP, which is Ideal Client Profile. And then I came up with a new acronym called ACP, which is Acceptable Client Profile. Usually, if your answer is, oh, I work with individuals who have more than $100,000 net worth or $500,000 net worth, that's an acceptable client profile, right? That means you might accept any client who has this particular net worth. They're not necessarily your ideal clients, though. That might be the scope of who you would be willing to work with. Ideal client is who your best clients are that you work with the absolute best, right? And that's likely to be much, much narrower. These are the clients that are just dream clients, that it's easy and fun to work with them, and they refer people naturally, and you come away from interactions with them going, oh my goodness, I wish all of my clients were like that. Who is your ideal client? Think about who that really is. Are you better suited to working with people in a particular stage of life, in a particular demographic, in a particular area, region, whatever that looks like, or a particular situation, right? Often that can be situational. Like, oh, I work with founders who have had a big exit and have a bunch of money to invest as a result. That's a very specific ideal client profile. And likely, if you have a good number of those types of clients, you'll be even better served. You'll be able to serve them better by bringing on more, right? And so I would encourage you to really think about like who's your ideal, not just who is kind of accidental or acceptable. So when we're talking about your ideal client, be intentional and narrow on that. And then as you do your referral campaigns, referrals matter even more, again, when people are a little more uncertain, when the market's changing, when people are looking for trust and they're being slower to make decisions, they're more likely to go seek outside information, right? They're more likely to ask for referrals. They're more likely to go to trusted people currently to get information about you. So it becomes even more important. I have clients that we run a monthly referral campaign for different types of professionals who might be able to refer them. By the way, these don't have to be huge campaigns, right? Maybe it's purely like, hey, I'm going to go to the 10, investment realtors in my area because they likely work with the types of people that I work with as well, whatever that looks like. It could be a fairly small number if you're doing specific outreach with a good message and you're hyper local. It can be really, really powerful, assuming again that you work with clients that are heavily regional to you. I've seen as much as a 10% success rate of getting referrals from some of these types of campaigns, right? That we had at least 1 in 10 people that we reached out to refer at least one client. And by the way, some of those refer a bunch of clients because they realize you're a great source and a great resource for their people. So they do it over and over again. If you're doing a center of influence campaign and asking for referrals, please reward those people, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's a gift card. Maybe it's just a nice handwritten note. Maybe it's some other thing. You want to reward that behavior, right? We always want to keep them repeating the behaviors that we want. So we want to make sure that we're rewarding and thanking those people for those referrals. And also, by the way, people who've referred to you previously, maybe you add them to a campaign for occasional follow-up and just reminders. Hey, we've loved your referrals in the past. Just a reminder to keep an eye out for anybody else we might want to help. Is a great way to connect and, stay top of mind. All right. So what does all this look like in practice in terms of different types of campaigns? Again, maybe on a weekly basis, you're connecting with new connections. If you're someone who's, doing local networking events or going to, any sort of physical events where you're making new connections, you might want to do that. Or maybe weekly, you're just going in and going, okay, what types of people do I want to connect with this week, right? And then nurture touches. Obviously, you're going to be wanting to do uh, a campaign to follow up on recent leads. So maybe anybody who's come in the last 90 days, you're just going to do the occasional touch and check in with them. Just, hey, wanted to see if I can be helpful. Is anything going on your end that I can help with, etc. Right? So some of that stuff happens weekly and it may be manual or could be automated depending on how you want to approach it. Monthly, maybe you're doing a themed campaign at least once a month. I see this sometimes as often as once a week. By the way, I think weekly is a little bit excessive to be talking about shifts in the market and other things. So I feel like at least once a month is probably sufficient. Could be again quarterly. Reminders about specific times of the year, maybe things that have changed in the market that people need to be aware of, current events. And again, the more specific you are about your ideal customer profile, the more targeted you can make this information to them, right? Rather than just having information that's relevant to pretty much anyone. And then I would also encourage you at least once a month to do one round of referral or center of influence push. Pick something different each time, right? Maybe you're asking for referrals from family members one time. The next time you're asking, making connections with local, HR leaders, whatever that looks like. But do it consistently. If you do it once a month, I promise you by about 3 months in, you'll be getting more referrals than you would have ever thought possible. And I see that all the time. It's just consistency. It's starting to build that, and maybe only one person in a given month ends up referring anyone, but it starts to compound over time, right? And then once you've done that referral or center of influence push, again, add them to a follow-up campaign as well, and make sure that they're getting regular touch bases, regular reminders. Hey, we're still around. Hey, we'd still love to help. All right, quarterly reconnection campaign. This is really just keeping things warm, right? I will say, so my mortgage broker does a really great job of this. At least once a quarter, he just reaches out, he texts and says, "Hey, how's it going? Any thoughts about real estate? Please let me know. Or if you know anyone who maybe could use a mortgage or is thinking about refinancing, please send them my way." Super, super calm. It's not real pushy. It's just like, "Hey, I'm still alive. I haven't had a new mortgage in 5, almost 6 years, and I still remember his name and I still remember to refer him when it's relevant, right? Because he manages to stay top of mind. So that's what we mean by reconnection campaign. That's a great example. And LinkedIn is, of course, a perfect route to do this because most people are on LinkedIn. It's not super pushy. By the way, it's less likely to get lost in an email inbox, right? So I would argue that LinkedIn is a great place to do it. Then at least on an annual basis, or maybe every 6 months, depending on how you want to run it, your existing customer referral campaigns, right? Could be separate from your monthly campaigns, but your existing customers, people who have already invested in you in terms of trusting you to advise them, are great sources of referrals. Of course, this is probably one that I see most people do, but they don't do it consistently. Again, so how can you set up systems in your business where maybe you're exporting a list and pulling it into WeConnect or into LinkedIn and doing this at least every 6 months on a regular basis, right? Because it makes a huge, huge difference. And then ongoing market or event triggered outreach. Obviously, there are things that happen in the market that you should be reacting to when they're big enough things that you think they will impact a lot of your target audience. Do some outreach around it. Again, if you're doing this via email, that's great, but LinkedIn often has higher deliverability, higher ability to kind of cut through the noise, right? Because we all get so many emails, we all get way, way fewer LinkedIn messages. So if you're connecting with the people that you're interacting with already, you're building up a base that you can then send out messages to and be of use to. All right, well, great. We're talking about, what, 7, 8 different types of campaigns we should be running throughout the year. Fantastic. What about messaging, though? All right. Um, we want to encourage you to start conversations. We we have some funny sellers who talk about, just pitching people out of the blue is really, really unlikely to land in a positive way. And again, in a market in financial advising where you're likely to be a trusted advisor, it's just not the way you want anyway. It's how can I be helpful? How can I leave them with value? And not just, hey, come use me, right? So that's always my question. How can you use them with value, regardless of whether they ever use you? Lead with context, not a pitch. Give them something relevant that is a reason to listen or pay attention, right? And then ask really simple questions. We have a ton of salespeople who have this approach, and I'm fascinated by it. They're just asking really simple questions. Like, hey, I'm curious how you're adjusting because of XYZ event. Or, hey, with everything going on in the market right now, are you rethinking your investment strategy? Are you leaning more into the stock market or less? Are you being more conservative, right? There are some really basic questions that people might be willing to engage on. The other one is, again, leave them with value. I just thought this was worth sharing. Wanted to make sure you'd seen that there was this major change. Here's a resource on that. And point them to a resource that is not yours. Point them somewhere useful, right? If you can be the source of helpful information, they will come back to you when they need other helpful information. So that would be my approach in terms of messaging. It is one that I hear over and over and over again. And it just works. It still works. I still talk to people all the time where this is the approach they take. Ask really simple, basic questions, get a response, and start conversations, start an engagement, right? Don't go straight to like, hey, can we book some time? Or hey, have you picked an advisor to help with your tax strategy for next year or whatever that looks like. Um, just engage in conversations. By the way, this should be supported. So this is your actual outreach strategy. It should be supported by your posting and engagement strategy, right? So one of the things you should be doing is building up your network so that you have more and more people in your network, and then posting on a reasonable cadence where people will come to you when it's appropriate. And again, that has to do with triggers and timing, right? So stay top of mind, be posting regularly. When we do research among our customer base, we find that people are much, much, much more likely to consider LinkedIn one of their top sources of leads if they post at least once a week. So keep that in mind that it's a two-sided approach in terms of engagement and posting alongside your actual outreach. All right. So what do we see that most advisors are doing incorrectly? It really is bursts of activity. What happens most commonly is, uh-oh, business is a little slow right now. There's not a whole lot going on, so let me spend a bunch of time investing in LinkedIn, right? Which makes sense. I understand that. Um, then when they don't see immediate results, and by the way, let's be real, LinkedIn is not an immediate results kind of thing. LinkedIn is a invest in your network and it pays dividends over the longer term type of situation. So you may not see immediate results, especially if you're not running the right types of campaigns. So they stop and then they never build up that momentum. So it really is ongoing investment, little tweaks, little campaigns that you run throughout the year. It's not really that they're doing more, it's just consistency, right? It's how are you scheduling that throughout the year? What are you doing on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis that makes a difference? Um, so my question, if you're on the webinar and you've been listening to me now for half an hour talk about all this stuff, my question for you is what's stopping you? What's stopping you from doing this consistently? And this is not a question I could answer, but I'll tell you this is what I see most commonly is what's stopping you is not having like a consistent system and not necessarily knowing what the right thing to do is. So it doesn't get executed on regularly. And it's also not easy, right? If what you're doing is spending an hour on LinkedIn a day manually hunting for the right people and doing, typing in messages and all of that, it takes a lot of investment. We get that. And when you're doing it that way, it also, when things get busy, it's easy to fall by the wayside, right? And so unfortunately, when you get busier and you fall off on your activity, you're also not going to reap the rewards anymore. So Of course, here at Reconnect, we think automation can help with a lot of that. I would be remiss in not telling you that I think that you can automate a ton of this. And most of what we talked about, you absolutely can automate. We help users all the time with more millions of connection requests and making a ton of new connections, right? Sending all the messages, setting up the campaigns in ways that are just repeatable. And by the way, campaigns that you can run, pause, run again, pause, tweak, run again, right? So that it just happens without you needing to actively manage it. Because everybody's ideal is that leads just land in your inbox, referrals just happen automatically without you needing to spend a ton of time and energy on it. So we think we can help with that. Certainly, we're helping a ton of financial advisors today in that type of arena. Um, and if you are ready to try that out, we'd love to get you signed up for a free 14-day trial at WeConnect.io. And we'd also love to walk you through a demo of more specifically how you build out campaigns, what strategy. By the way, the investment in WeConnect is a relatively small one compared to the potential results. But again, LinkedIn isn't something that you're going to turn it on and tomorrow it's going to start, paying huge dividends. It is a slow and steady investment in building up your network and how you leverage that network into a source of leads for you. All right, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and look and see if there are any questions. If you have not submitted any questions and there are any questions that you would like to submit, please go ahead and share them now. All right, this is a quiet group. Wow, it's relatively rare I get to the end and don't have a whole lot of questions. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I covered is a lot of this stuff, I get it, it's not groundbreaking, right? It's just pulling it all together into consistency and a system. And so when we're talking about what you should be doing on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, this is where the magic happens. This is where it is, okay, exactly what do you do and when, and how do you do that consistently to drive results? I know it's not the most interesting thing. I get that you're probably a financial advisor to do other things other than, spend a ton of time on LinkedIn. It's exactly why a tool like WeConnect can help. But these basics scheduled throughout the year can and will start to build up your momentum and the leads that are coming knocking on your door. And that's everybody's best case scenario, is not having to go hunt for new clients when things are slow, right? Is not all of a sudden kind of scrambling for leads. It is a system that drives leads and drives leads in a way that increases trust, that brings you the right types of people, your ideal client. By the way, because if you're doing these referral pushes, you can tell them exactly what type of client you love to work with. Hey, send me, founders, tech founders in your network. I would love to work with them. That is absolutely something you can do to be more intentional about your referrals rather than just send me anybody you can think of. So it really will make a huge difference in your outreach. All right, we'll give it just another moment. And if we don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've had an opportunity to process and think about how you're doing your own outreach. Again, it seemed like it was a pretty mixed group today. And also think about what's stopping you. Why aren't you doing this today? Are you not doing it because you don't think LinkedIn will be a great source of leads? Because we genuinely have the privilege of working with financial advisors all the time who have a ton of leads coming to them from LinkedIn. So I don't think it's a value issue. The right kinds of professionals and the right data for those professionals are absolutely on LinkedIn. So what else is stopping you? Just prioritizing it. I get that. If you're not prioritizing your network and how you leverage your network and how you frankly monetize your network right now, when will it become a priority for you, right? When some other source of leads dries up, or when you realize another source of leads maybe becomes too expensive. It's something to think about of like, why am I not doing this right now? And maybe there's a good reason why you're not doing it right now. Maybe there are intentional decisions about like LinkedIn isn't a priority for me right now because I get my leads, from corporate, I get leads elsewhere. I've got a full client load right now, so I don't need more. But I think being conscious of what's stopping you and how to go about it in a way that builds a consistent, repeatable process is really, really important. So I hope that's been helpful for you today. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. If you celebrate Easter this weekend, have a lovely Easter weekend.